So, Larry, at the very end of the week, on Good Friday, we would say, those of us of that persuasion, we got the jobs numbers, 236,000, pretty much right on expectations, although the bond market was a little disappointing. They were hoping something softer. What do you make of them?
I think this was not a very newsworthy bit of news. Things came in pretty much as people expected. The numbers reflected the strength that we certainly saw in the early part of the first quarter. I don't think this bears on very much on interpreting the economy because the numbers are a few weeks old when we get them, and more importantly, because those numbers, employment and unemployment, are lagging indicators of what's happening in the real economy. So the real question is still how much of a credit crunch is coming in the wake of all the banking problems, in the wake of all the disturbances in the banking sector, and that's a very hard thing to know.
Well, that's interesting. Credit crunch. I mean, some people refer to that as saying the credit's just not available as opposed to that it's more expensive. Is that what you mean by it? And again, when do you think we might have a sense of whether that comes to pass?
I think it's a combination of, something's available at any price, but if the price is too high, it doesn't really matter that it is available. I think we're getting a sense that there is some substantial amount of constriction in credit. If you looked at the forward-looking numbers this week from the PMI surveys, those numbers were really quite weak. If you look at the UI claims with the new seasonal adjustment, they're suggesting much less strength than they had been earlier. When you looked at vacancies, they seem to be coming down. So I think you have to say that recession probabilities are going up at this point, and I think the Fed's got very, very difficult decisions ahead of it with very much two-sided risk. That's a consequence of where we sort of found ourselves with an overheated economy.
Well, the Fed's going to have to do something coming up in early May. What would your advice be to them, given where we are right now with the data you're seeing?
It's too early to come to a view. I think what's pretty clear is that we're in the very late innings of any tightening, of the current tightening cycle, and whether there's going to be another move necessary or not, I think that's a judgment they should be holding off on until the very last kind of moment, because it's not easy to make that judgment, given that we are getting more and more indication that a variety of things, starting from commercial real estate, are softening, David.
So, Larry, those of us in the financial news media, as you know, tend to focus on individual data points and individual decisions of the Fed. Take a step back, though. The Fed, I'm assuming, has a longer-term view of where the economy is, where it's headed. Take a longer-term view over the next year or so. How should the Fed be looking at this economy?
I'm going to even take a slightly longer-term view than that, David. I think the Fed needs to engage in some serious soul-searching. They rely on models. They rely on a set of established, institutionalized procedures. Those procedures got inflation very, very wrong for a very long time. And those procedures missed what was happening at Silicon Valley Bank and in a number of banks because of the discontinuity associated with highly mobile deposits and associated with loss of market value on long-duration securities. And so I think the Fed needs to think about the ways it does business, the ways in which it does, and more importantly, does not consider discontinuities in the economic environment. I think the other thing to which the Fed needs to turn its focus is its concept of the future financial system in this world that is high interest rate, high digital. How is it that we're going to have a financial system that's structured? Because more than I think most people have appreciated, we've had a financial system that has been based on the willingness of large numbers of households to earn almost nothing on their money.
Larry, let's turn to specifically something that you've been quite involved in. You've done a lot of work, of written papers on the question of IRS and tax enforcement. Not raising taxes, I'm talking about, just collecting the ones we're due already. You've talked about it on this program. You've been talking about it for some time. There was something put in the Inflation Reduction Act. I think maybe you're the godfather of it, actually, to put some more money into it. And this week we had an announcement of the first step. They're going to do digital first. What do you think about the approach as you understand it?
I was very pleased to see what IRS Commissioner Werfel had come up with, working closely under the direction of Secretary Yellen and Deputy Secretary Adeyemo. This is a huge opportunity. Without raising taxes that are legislated on anybody, we all agree that people should pay the taxes they owe. Our country's got a tax gap over the next 10 years that's going to be $7 trillion. God knows we can figure out how to collect 5% of that. I actually think, and there's some research that's going to come out in the next few weeks that very strongly confirms this view, that we could probably get 10 or more percent of that, and we could get it from affluent people in the top 1% of the income distribution, just by making sure that people don't cheat. And that's at the center of this program. What's also at the center of this program is starting to provide better, more decent service for people so they get their refunds quickly, so they get the phone answered when they have a question. God knows the era of ChatGPT should not be the era of vacuum tubes at the IRS. And full credit to the Biden administration people and the people in Congress who supported this legislation here in 2022 to bring the IRS into the 21st century at last. And I think Commissioner Werfel is strong new leadership in that regard. Of course, it's the planning part is easy. The objective setting part is easy. Now's when the hard work of execution begins. But this is something that all Americans have a stake in. And again, this is not arguing about what is a tax shelter or what isn't a tax shelter. This is money that everybody agrees is owed, that we are not collecting, that comes disproportionately from our wealthiest taxpayers.
And finally, Larry, you said the magic words, to borrow from Groucho Marx there, if I may. ChatGPT, you brought those words originally to Wall Street Week. I know you've been following it closely now. As you talk to people about ChatGPT and its potential, where do you think we are headed?
Here's the thing I'm seeing more and more. I think it's coming for the cognitive class. ChatGPT is going to replace what doctors do, hearing symptoms and making diagnoses, before it changes what nurses do, helping patients get up and handle themselves in the hospital. It's going to change what traders do, going in and out of financial markets, before it changes what salespeople do, making relationships with potential clients. It's going to change what authors and editors do, before it changes what people in bookstores do. And so I think this is going to be an enormous change over time in our society. And I think it's got a great opportunity to level a lot of playing fields. And I have to say, David, that I think some of the people who've been quickest to say structural change is just something you have to live with and accept as the part of modernity when it was happening to other people, people who maybe wore uniforms to work, are now going to be seeing it happen to them. And it will be interesting to see how they respond.